Want to be Acts chapter 14. All right, so let's go back to the map. We're on Paul's first missionary journey. And remember, they left the church of Antioch. He, Barnabas, and John Mark. They went to Seleucia. Then they went to Cyprus, ministered on the east coast, went to the west coast. They went up to the north side of that. By the way, anybody need a book? I have one book left. One once, twice, 3 times. 3 times. I wish I would have numbered these.
Oh, gee. I don't know if I want it.
Good night.
That's where the map is, isn't it?
Yeah, find the map. It's right to the left. Okay, back. Okay. So we're on the first missionary journey. It takes 2 years, and we're covering 2 chapters, Acts 13, Acts 14. And we have already looked at Acts chapter 13, how he leaves Cyprus, if you're looking at the map there, heads up north to an area called Pamphylia, and he stops at some cities there. Then after ministering there, he heads up to Antioch, which is a different Antioch. And after ministering there, they boot him out of the city. They said, "Get out of Dodge. We don't want you here." So they move eastward, and now they're in an area called Lycaonia. And I want you to notice the 3 small cities there, the tri-city of Lystra, Iconium, and Derbe. He comes to Iconium first. He's going to receive some persecution, some Lystra, and then on to Derbe. So that tri-city is where we want to be, and that starts in Acts chapter 14. So a page or 2 away from that map, we are on letter E, the mission to Lycaonia. The mission to Lycaonia. Number 1, the province of Lycaonia. Now, I showed you the 3 cities, the tri-city, Lystra, Iconium, and Derbe. We have here a quad city. Before it was called quad, it was actually called tri-city. It was Rock Island, Moline, and Davenport. So you had 1 on Iowa side and 2 on Illinois side. Eventually, as Bettendorf began to grow, it became the quad cities, 2 on Iowa side and 2 on Illinois. As John Deere and some others began to expand east of Moline, East Moline began to incorporate and develop. More businesses, more people came in, all that stuff. And eventually, I think it was in the 60s, don't quote me, they tried to use the term Queen Cities. But it never took because Quad City was already famous by that time. But we certainly understand that there's a conglomeration. Just East Moline gets left out. I feel sorry for them. Kelowna does too, by the way. I'm kind of bummed about that. But anyway, the province of Lycaonia, it involves these 3 these cities here. So let's first of all look at this cities. Iconium is the chief city. It's an area that's fertile, it's productive. Today, it's known as Konya. Lystra is a Roman colony that Timothy was most likely from. And then Derbe is 16 miles southeast of Lystra. So you have Iconium, Lystra, and then Derbe is 16 miles away from that. But this would be a tri-city area, and the whole region is called Lycaonia. Now, I've gone to the Philippines twice, and every time I was there, depending on which island you go to, they have not only different languages, but they have different dialects within those languages. These 3 cities had their own local language. I didn't say loco, I said local. They have their own local language. In fact, later on, we're going to see the term speech, the speech of Lycaonia. So it wasn't Greek, it wasn't Latin, it wasn't Hebrew. It wasn't anything that was known. It was known to them. So it was kind of their own dialect, which obviously then, if we know that, it makes sense because there's going to be a lack of understanding of what's going to be said. So that was number one, the province of Lycaonia. Number two, the persecution at Iconium. The persecution at Iconium. Now, when he was in Antioch, he received persecution. They expelled him. There was a big uproar. Really, the biggest thing was because he preached the gospel, the truth, and there was a large gathering of people that followed him. Well, some people were envious of that. They didn't like that. So they got the head honchos together, and they booted Paul and Barnabas out. Well, here he's going to receive some persecution. Let's look at letter A, the occasion. Okay, chapter 14, verse number 1. And it came to pass in Iconium that they went both together into the synagogue. That was their custom. That was their custom in the previous cities as well. They went into the synagogue of the Jews, and so spake that a great multitude, both of the Jews and also of the Greeks, believed. Now, that's sort of the same thing that took place back in Antioch. But now he's coming over to this new place, this Iconium, and people are becoming believers. Now, do you see at the end of verse number 1 where it says Jews also of the Greeks? Now, remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. There's a difference whenever you see in the Bible the word Greeks versus Grecians. You would think Grecians mean people that are from Greece, but they're not. Greeks are Greeks, and Grecians are people who adopted the customs and the language of the Greek culture. So these people were Grecians. But here it doesn't say Grecians, it says Greeks. So clearly he's got Jews and Gentiles believing here. And notice that they were both were in the synagogue. So number 1, the menaces. Just think of Dennis the Menace and just pluralize it. So menaces. All right, so I want to find out who are the menaces, are the people who are causing trouble. You would think that becoming a believer would be a good thing. So who would have a problem with that? Well, let's look at it. Look at verse number 2. But the unbelieving Jews stirred up the Gentiles and made their minds evil affected against the brethren. All right, so you have Jews and Gentiles, and some are becoming believers, but now you have unbelieving Jews. They're stirring up the Gentiles. So really you have two groups of people against and two groups of people for. You have the believing Jews and Greeks, and then you have the unbelieving Jews and Gentiles. But two factions, for and against. But these are the menaces, the unbelieving Jews. Number 2, let's look at the missionaries. The missionaries. Now, here's Paul and Barnabas, and they're traveling, and they just got booted out of Antioch. Now, all of a sudden, there's people believing. That's a good thing. But now there's unbelieving Jews, and they're stirring up the problems more with the Gentiles. Well, notice in verse 3 the stickability, the consistent speaking, and the signs that are used here. Look at verse 3. Long time therefore abode they, speaking boldly in the Lord, which gave testimony unto the word of his grace, and granted signs and wonders to be done by their hands. So God graciously allows these miracles to be done by Paul and Barnabas. And Paul and Barnabas was preaching in Antioch. They got booted out. They're preaching in Iconium, still facing problems, but they stick it out. They're not just like, I'm going to quit. John Mark quit on the first journey, but Paul and Barnabas were still preaching and preaching. As long as they allow them to preach, they're going to keep preaching. And no matter what the opposition is. That encourages me, again, to be reminded, I think I mention this in some form almost every Wednesday, to keep on keeping on, no matter what problems we endure. Just stick it out and be found faithful. So we see the menaces. We see, number 2, the missionaries. Number 3, we see the multitude. The multitude. Letter A, the division. Look at verse number 4. But the multitude of the city was divided, and part held with the Jews, and part with the apostles. So again, you have these factions of 2 different groups of people, for and against. And you have some that are holding true to the Jews. Of course, that's referring to the unbelieving Jews. And then, obviously, then to the apostles. Now, curious, we know that the apostles, Paul would be counted as an apostle, but Barnabas was an apostle. Why is it mentioned here that part was with the apostles? That's curious. Who's writing the book of Acts? Luke is. So Luke is referring to Paul and Barnabas as the apostles. I know this with certainty based upon verse 14, which when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, so clearly he's referring to both of them as apostles. Now the reason is simple. It's simplistic, I should say. It's not simple. Whenever the word apostle is used in the Bible, it's used in 2 ways. One is a very specific way that means these men were specifically called by Jesus Christ, and they are sent out. But another way the word apostle is a very broad term that just means somebody who's sent out. And you have to look at the context. So using the word apostle, calling Barnabas apostle, just means sent one. And obviously Paul and Barnabas are sent. They're out of Antioch and they're on this missionary journey. So it's not incorrect to call Paul and Barnabas an apostle. But occasion, A was occasion, B is opposition. Any others I miss? Okay. Please interrupt me, and I appreciate that. I really, really do. I want us to be on the same page. Yes. Number 1 is the menaces. Number 2 is the missionaries. Number 3 is the multitude. Letter A is the division. And then letter B, the despitefulness. The despitefulness. You say, why did you choose that word, Pastor? That's a weird, long word. Because it's actually in the verse. Look at verse 5. And when there was an assault made, both of the Gentiles and also of the Jews, that's the unbelieving Jews, with their rulers, to use them despitefully and to stone them. Now, I want to pick apart this verse a little bit. I find it very interesting. Keep in mind that there's believing Jews and believing Greeks or Gentiles. Then there's unbelieving Jews and unbelieving Gentiles. And the unbelieving Jews are stirring up the Gentiles. And now they've coerced the rulers also to come alongside. But did you notice here it says they wanted to use them despitefully? That wording there, to use them, and then to put the word despitefully there, literally means to put them out in public to humiliate them. It means to shame them, to abuse them. They want to make a public example of them before stoning them. Their intent was to stone them, but they wanted to make a public abuse of them before. Nowadays, people just take out their phone and post it. But back then, they needed to bring it to a large area where people were gathering and abuse them somehow before they stoned them. So they certainly were filled with, not the word violence, not hostility, hatred, mischief. Mischief is the word I'm looking for. So division, despitefulness, and then letter C, the determination. The determination. Once again, these guys, Paul and Barnabas, are going to keep on keeping on. How would you feel like if you just got done ministering to somebody and all of a sudden somebody says, I'm going to want to abuse you, post it on all these social media sites, I want you to stop, and then I'm going to stone you and kill you. You know, how would we respond today? Some people are like, I'm going to stop ministering. Oh! You know, but here's these guys. Notice verse 6. But they were aware of it and fled unto Lystra and Derbe. All right, so their life is in danger. They're not going to be stupid and go, okay, let's get stoned, man. And I don't mean it like that. But so they were expelled out of Antioch, and now they don't want to have them in Iconium, and now they're just going to move on. They go to Lystra and Derbe, cities of Lycaonia, and unto the region that lieth round about. And there they preached the gospel. So again, he's preaching wherever he has opportunity. If they're not accepting him, he just moves on and keeps preaching. So very determined. All right, so now we're going to look at the power at Lystra. All right, kicked out of Antioch, kicked out of Iconium, and now they're going on to Lystra. Number 3, the power at Lystra. I don't know if I mentioned that. Letter A, the soothing of the impotent man. The soothing of the impotent man. Number 1, the miracle. Number 1, the miracle. Look with me at verse number 8. And there sat a certain man at Lystra, impotent in his feet, being a cripple from his mother's womb, who never had walked. Now, before we read on, I want you to emotionally and mentally put yourself in this person's shoes. All your life, it doesn't say how old he is, but he's a man. So let's just choose an age, 35. I have no idea how old he is. He could be 23, he could be 58. I don't know. But he's an old man. But from his mother's womb, he was crippled. He was impotent in his feet. He had never walked. He'd watched other kids do it, watched other teens play basketball and other sports, I'm sure, that were around at that time, and did all of that, but he had never walked before. So put yourself in this guy's shoes. Look at verse number 9. The same heard Paul speak. Okay, so Paul was speaking, and this guy heard him, who, Paul, steadfastly beholding him and perceiving that he had faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, this is Paul speaking, stand upright on thy feet. Now watch this. And he leaped and walked for the very first time. Now, if you and I lost our ability to walk, we would know what it was, at least what we lost. And we'd be thankful for the years that we had ability to walk, bummed out that we could no longer, but having the experience as an adult. Now, a baby, when they learn how to crawl, maybe they get excited, now that they can reach, the electric outlets, and all this. And they're excited that they can move, But as an adult that you have never walked before, I think there was some emotion there. I think he was like maybe Pentecostal or something. I don't know. Baptist-costal. I'm sure he believed right. But nevertheless, he's excited. He's leaping and walking. So this miracle takes place. Now keep in mind, Paul and Barnabas, newbies to this area as far as ministers, they're missionaries there. All of a sudden they have this great power to heal a guy that the whole area would have known who he was. He's been around for years. He's a man. Never walked before. And all of a sudden he's walking. So word gets out. People are texting each other real fast, and posting it. And it's just amazing. Word spreads fast. So note, that's the miracle. Number 2, the mistake. The mistake. Now, before we read the verses, and I ask you kindly, don't read the verses right now. To know a little bit of history behind these verses is so helpful. You can read the verses and understand it, but I think it adds eons to it if you know the history. In those day and age, that day and age, people believed in gods, mythology, and they believed that at one time Zeus, the god, the king, and Hermes came down to that area in the form of a human. He visited this area, knocking on doors and asking people for hospitality, asking for help. Everybody refused him, except for one older couple. And I wish I would have wrote their names down. You could find it in history, but I just can't remember their names. But this older couple, at the end of them going through all these places and such, and only one couple helping them, he prospered this older couple and cursed everybody else, according to mythology. And so here are Paul and Barnabas now healing, and these people that are in this area are thinking this is Zeus and Hermes coming back. We better respond right this time. Oh! And so knowing that history, now let's read these verses, starting at verse number 11. And when the people saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in the speech of Lycaonia, in their dialect, "The gods are come down to us in the likeness of men." And they called Barnabas Jupiter, that's Zeus, and Paul Mercurius, which is Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. Now, Greece had their names and Romans had the names, but it's the same gods typically. But Jupiter here and Mercury are what they're calling Barnabas and Paul because they think that these guys are returning back to earth. Then, verse 13, then the priest of Jupiter, which was before their city, brought oxen and garlands unto the gates and would have done sacrifice with the people. It was typical in that day and age, if you were sacrificing to a god and you wanted to gain their favor, there were several ways to do it. You can offer your child, your own child sacrifice. You can offer animals. You can bring garlands to honor them. You can bring meals. You can bring different things to get a blessing, to earn a blessing. Some of this actually is in Catholicism even to this day, bits of it. But so that's what that's talking about. They were bringing these things and getting ready to offer and to recognize Paul and Barnabas as gods. So that's the mistake that these people make. And so even in those verses, you see the dialect, the deity, and the devotion. And another 3-point outline, but that's okay. And then we see the message. We see the message. Now, I thought this was going to take much longer. This is actually my last point for tonight, and I'm a little shocked what time it is, but that's okay. I was telling our guest preacher the other day when he was here. Of course, that's when I would tell him when he's here. I said, he said, "Now refresh my mind when we get out." I said, "Well, typically I go from 11, and even after the invitation, we don't dismiss after 12. But you know, if the Lord leads you, that's fine. But nobody's going to complain that if you dismiss early." he said, I was a pastor for 28 years. I understand. But anyway, this is the last thing. Now, here's the whole thing. I've given you 2 points already about keep on keeping on, how Paul and Barnabas, no matter the opposition, the negativity, they just kept preaching. But here's the main truth I want to get across, which is the message. That's your blank to fill in. Now, see if you can remember the message that Paul brought last week in Acts chapter 13 when we were discussing the long message that he preached to the people of Antioch. Does anybody remember where he started out? Not Genesis. Moses. He started out Moses, then he went through Joshua, then he went through the Judges. He's taken a trip through the memory lane of the Old Testament. Moses, Joshua, Judges. Then he brought out Samuel, and then the very first king who was Saul, and then he brought out David, and then he brought out John the Baptist. And it just skipped automatically to John the Baptist, who brought and started preaching and preparing the way for Jesus. And then he preached about Jesus for a little bit and talked about Jesus resurrecting. And he kept talking about how Jesus is better than Moses, and he's preaching this in the synagogue. Well, it was a lengthy message. Watch this message and how short it is, and tell me why. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. What is the main emphasis, or who is he referring to in this message? Last message was Jesus Christ. Who's he referring to here? And tell me why. All right, so let's read it together. Look at verse 14. Which, they're bringing these things to offer to them, which when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard of, they rent their clothes and ran in among the people, crying out and saying, Sirs, why do you these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that ye should turn from these vanities unto the living God, which made heaven and earth, and the sea, and all things that are therein, who in times past suffered all nations to walk in their own ways. Nevertheless, he left not himself without witness, in that he did good and gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. And with these sayings scarce restrained they the people, that they had not done sacrifice unto them. So who is he? His main message in chapter 13 was Jesus Christ, and he took them through the Old Testament. But in this one, it's a short message. Who's the main person he's focusing on here? God the Father, and particularly as what? The Creator. The one who made the heaven and earth, the one who causes the rains, who bring us the produce, all this stuff. He's talking about this. Tell me why you think, you could have a different reason than I, but why you think he is bringing one message in Acts 13 and a different message in Acts 14. And I say different message, it's all about God, it's pointing people to God in both. I get it, but any thoughts here? Say again? That's true. That's true. That is so true.
Well, it's a different city.
Yes.
And depending on the region,
Yes.
it could mean a lot more to them than the other.
That's correct. Yeah, so in there he was preaching at a synagogue, and here he's preaching to these other people who are persecuting him against it. They're unbelieving, and they had belief in gods. And so a different region, different city, different scenario, different situation altogether. One message, Jesus Christ. Another one, God, the Father, the Creator, still pointing people to God. And here's my whole point I want to get across. When we witness to people, it's not always the same. Sometimes we present Jesus one way, and other times we present Jesus another way. I don't talk to the children the same way I talk to an adult. I'm not going to use the word justification with a child. You know, and if they're totally unchurched, which, by the way, 2 weeks ago, we had a lady, a sophomore teenage girl, visit church for the very first time. She told me she had never been inside of a church building before, with the exception of a funeral or a wedding. That was the first time that she came to our church. So there are people out there that are unchurched. And so if I knew somebody was unchurched giving them the gospel, I would be very basic in presenting the gospel. May God help us when we do give a tract out, when we do give a presentation, an invitation to church, the gospel out, to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit of what to say and how, what the audience is. Let's put it that way. Let's do the belief system of having gods and the words that Rick used as well. We all have to take that in a case-by-case situation. So may God help us to be sensitive to that. That's where I want to leave us tonight. Any quick thoughts before we close? Maybe a different thought came to you? Nothing? Okay, I actually thought that was going to take longer, but we were going to go farther tonight, but I thought that would be the time it would take. But all right. Brother Niles, could you dismiss us in prayer, please?